Okay, you guys, have you ever spent hours on a watercolor piece only to realize at the end that something isn't quite right? What if I told you it was because you were using one of these 5 popular watercolor supplies and it was ruining your art without you even realizing it? When it comes to watercolor painting, most of us will focus on like technique or color theory or composition, but we often overlook a crucial aspect that can make or break our artwork, our supplies. Believe it or not, using the wrong materials can completely sabotage your creative efforts, leading to a disappointing result, a whole lot of frustration, and lost time. A lot of the time, when you're having trouble like that, it's one of these 5 popular watercolor supplies that's causing the problem. And the scary thing is, a lot of watercolor artists use these supplies every day, and they don't even know that they might be sabotaging their own work. If you don't want to be one of them, grab yourself something cozy to drink, come on into my studio, and let's have a little chat. Okay, so you guys, this is actually a highly requested video. I've had a ton of people ask me what they're doing wrong with their watercolors, and I could tell by looking at their paintings that a lot of the time they're using one of these 5 supplies. So let's get right into it so we can all figure out what not to do. The first thing on the list of things you need to check if your watercolor paintings aren't turning out right is your paper. When I first started out, I grabbed a pad of watercolor paper from Walmart, brought it home, and after about 3 super frustrating hours, I threw it in the corner and I didn't try watercolor again for a year. I thought it was me, but it turned out it was the paper. So paper is arguably the most important supply in watercolor, and the secret to making good paintings is to use a 100% cotton watercolor paper. Watercolor paints are designed to be used on cotton paper. Many cheaper papers are made from cellulose or wood pulp, and you just aren't going to get the results you want if you're using cellulose paper. The first thing I tell a struggling watercolor artist to check is if their watercolor paper is cotton or not. If you're using a cellulose paper, your paints are going to dry dull, they might streak weird, they might bloom weird, you might get weird hard edges. It doesn't matter what brand of paper you use, but it does need to be 100% cotton. I'm assuming by now I've shown you some of the papers I've used, and you can see they're from all different brands, but they're all 100% cotton. Also, you guys, I want to take the time to say right now, if you are making one of these mistakes, don't feel bad. I've made them. Good artists I know have made them. We all make them. It's fine. Everybody needs to make mistakes to learn. It takes time, practice, and education to figure out if you're making these mistakes. One of the best places I've found to get art education is actually from Craftsy, which is perfect because they just happen to be the sponsor of today's video. Seriously though, you guys, I've been a member at Craftsy since I think like 2016, and I've taken so many classes there. They're the best classes. I was actually really excited when they reached out and wanted to sponsor a video because I know them, I love them. I've been a member of their online community and classes for 8 years, and I can really vouch for them and say I enjoy the classes very much. Craftsy actually has more than 2,000 classes. I've taken sewing classes, knitting classes, drawing, painting, art journaling, watercolor, illustration, and actually they have a ton of silversmithing classes over there too if you're interested in that. So you can learn just about whatever you would like to. They have classes in baking and photography, knitting, sewing, quilting, jewelry making, yoga, everything. And they're always adding new ones so you never run out of things to learn. Right now I'm working my way through 3 classes on Craftsy: Expressive Pages, Journaling Every Day by Judith Cassell-Mamet, Urban Sketching in 15 Minutes a Day by Suma CM, and Painting Wildlife, Acrylic and Mixed Media by Charlene Wood. I'm actually super excited about that one. We're learning how to combine acrylic and soft pastels, which are 2 of my favorite mediums, and we're creating really realistic wildlife paintings with them. I'm actually feeling really inspired by it. I'm sure you're going to be seeing some pieces that I've made from that class on my channel here soon. I think you guys are really going to like Craftsy too, and to make it even better, Craftsy have given you guys a very special discount. The first 1,000 of you to click the link in the video description will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. It's crazy good. Like, I can't believe it. That's crazy good. I hope you love Craftsy as much as I do, so be sure to check it out. The links will be all down below if you want to. So now let's move on to sneaky supply number 2. The next supply that people don't know is ruining their art is their brushes. A lot of time people will tell you that brushes don't matter, and I was one of them for a long time. But the more I used good brushes with my watercolors, the more I realized I was wrong. Probably by now you're seeing some of my favorite brushes. I'll link them down below too. It turns out that you can't just use cheap brushes that you would get from Walmart, and there's 3 reasons for that. A, the brush just doesn't hold enough paint and water. I would have to go back over and over to reload, and I'd get really frustrated. B, the tips on cheap brushes get a weird sort of like lip at the end almost right away, making it so that you don't have as good brush control, and that weird lip like will unexpectedly go in a way you don't expect, and it will ruin your painting. It did to me many times. I don't know what that's called, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed it, but it's ruined more than one of my paintings. C, the other weird problem I've had with cheap brushes is that when you load a good brush with paint and water and then like make your stroke on the paper, the good brush will release the paint and pigment in like a smooth and even flow. But when you try to do that with a bad brush, the bad brush will often release a puddle of water and pigment when it first touches the paper. The rest of the stroke might be smooth and even if it's decent, but in that first place where the brush touched the paper, that puddle will dry weird. This was something I didn't realize was even a problem until I tried better brushes and realized what was going on. I've probably already shown you the brushes that I like, but my favorite synthetic brushes that won't break the bank are the Princeton Neptune, the Princeton Aqualite, and the Princeton Velvet Touch. I use all of them for different situations. I could talk about it in a future video maybe. If you're okay with using a natural brush, I really like the Silver Black Velvet brush, which is a mix of squirrel and synthetic. I did not know that it wasn't completely synthetic when I bought it. I tend to prefer synthetic brushes because we have a pet ferret, and ferrets are related to sable, and it just, she's my fur baby. I don't have any problem with other people using natural brushes, but for my fur baby's sake, I just don't. So the last three sneaky supplies are ones that aren't quite as common knowledge as the first two. So the next supply that might be ruining your watercolor paintings are graphite pencils, and I can hear you right now. What? But I see you sketching out your paintings in graphite all the time. I do. I do, but I have a special trick. The problem with graphite is that graphite is water activated to some extent. So if you're using graphite and then going over it with your watercolor, you're activating that graphite and muddying your watercolor pigments, even if it's to a small extent. But here's my secret to stop that. Once you get your paintings all sketched out, remove some of the graphite with a kneaded eraser, and then get like a fine mist aerosol bottle, fill it with water, spray down your whole painting, just really wet it down, and do not touch the graphite while it's wet. Leave it to dry thoroughly and completely. I like to leave mine overnight, probably at least 4 to 6 hours. That sets the graphite into the paper, and you'll get a whole lot less activation when you come back in with your brushes and you can paint without worrying about it. The other way to avoid this is by sketching in colored pencils. My favorite for this is the Color Erase pencils. I'm sure you've seen me use them here. They erase pretty well. They aren't light fast, but it doesn't matter because you're going to cover up with paint anyway, and you're not going to see it. Match the pencil to the main color palette of your painting, warm for warm and cool for cool. My two favorites are the terracotta pencil for warm and indigo blue for cool. Number 4 on my list is black ink. And again, you're saying, Amy, I see you using black ink with your watercolors all the time. I do. It's only sometimes that black ink will seem too harsh for the line work on a watercolor painting. And figuring out ahead of time if the black will be too harsh, it takes practice and experience. And if you're new to watercoloring, I would suggest using brown ink until you have more of that experience. You can use something like the brown Pigment Micron, which they actually call sepia. I have the whole set of those and love them and use them all the time. You can also use a dip pen and a bottle of brown India ink. My favorite one for that is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay India ink in Van Dyke Brown. And again, you can also use colored pencil to do the line work. It works great for coming back in after the painting is done and doing the line work with them then. For that, I would recommend the Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils. They are a harder oil-based colored pencil, so you can sharpen it to a fine point and really get a good fine line. Most of their colors are also light fast. There are a few pink and purples that aren't, so check on them if you're using those colors, but most of them are light fast and archival and perfect for a painting you may want to sell. And number 5, the very last common art supply that might be ruining your watercolor paintings is black paint. If you've been here before, you've heard me say this. Don't use it. Just don't use black paint. I will use either a very dark blue or very dark brown for my blacks, either cool or warm, depending on the painting again. Don't use black paint to mute your colors, guys. It's Color Theory 101. Don't feel bad if you didn't know that. I have a video all about color theory. I'll link it down below in case you need to check it out. But you need to use complementary colors to mute and desaturate your paint, not black. Using black to desaturate your watercolor paint will make it look dull and lifeless, and you're going to lose some of that vibrancy and sparkle that's so special to watercolors. And on top of that, real black isn't found in nature. Black bears aren't really black. Crows aren't really black. Even like if you look at a black rock, maybe obsidian, I don't know. But black is really rare. Mute your colors with the complement. So like if you have a very bright purple, use yellow. Again, if you don't know how to do that or have trouble with color mixing, check out my Color Theory 101 video. If you need to darken a color, again, use a very dark blue or a brown. I only use black to do that if I am testing like a limited palette and I don't have black or a dark blue available or something like that. Black should be used very sparingly. If you're doing like an anime painting with watercolors and you want to use black, go ahead and use it. That's a whole different thing. But for the most part, don't use black in watercolor. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Choosing the right watercolor supplies is really critical to achieving the results you want in your finished work. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced artist, taking the time to select the right paints, brushes, paper, and other tools can make all the difference in the world. Remember, too, that your supplies are an investment in like your art and yourself as the artist. So by choosing the best tools for the job, you're going to be able to create works that stand the test of time and that you can be proud of. If you've had any frustrating experience with watercolor supplies or need help or would like a certain video to be made, I'd love to hear about it in the comments down below. If you're interested in learning about my watercolor techniques as well, be sure to check out my playlist for watercolor paintings, but also unlocking the magic of watercolor painting, layering watercolors in mixed media. That's a good video to start with. I'll link it down below just in case you want to check it out. If you haven't checked out my Patreon and would like to, it's only one tier. It's only $5. It's got exclusive videos and behind the scenes content and vlogs and photos and all sorts of stuff. I'll link that down below in case you want to check that out as well. If you haven't hit the like or subscribe button yet or left a comment, I would love it if you did. That's a no cost way for you to help support my channel, and I appreciate each and every one of you who take the time to do that. I hope you had a good time today and learned some stuff, and until next time, happy creating!